Hello, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you all for coming to one of the first panel sessions this morning at TEDAI Vienna. Give yourself a round of applause for getting up so early after the gala last night. We're going to talk on how, how to lead as AI advances. I'm Hilke Schellmann. I'm an investigative journalist. I'm a professor at NYU, now this year at Princeton. I'm here because last year I was a TEDAI speaker. So I'm having the time of my life this year because last year I was very nervous, holed up in my hotel room. But I think maybe more importantly, I'm here because I wrote a book on AI in hiring and AI in the workforce. So that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. And I have a group of phenomenal leaders in this space here who are going to tell us how they're leading through these enticing, dramatic times that we get to live through. So with me is Bolor-Erdene Battsengel.
Yes.
Okay. I'm trying. She's a founder and CEO of AI Academy in Asia, and she's trying to create equal access to AI education. And she's also a TEDAI speaker this year, so you'll see her tomorrow on the big stage. And she's the former vice president of digital development of Mongolia. And then to my left is Joe Atkinson. He's the global chief AI officer for PwC. And he's a member of the global commercial leadership team, and he works does AI internally and also brings it to their vendors outside of PwC. And also, you also work with upskilling and sort of thinking through working practices of more than 370,000 people worldwide. And then we have our Hardy Pemhiwa. Is that
Fantastic.
Okay. And he's the president and group CEO of Cassava Technologies. He has 20 plus years of senior leadership experience across telecoms, financial services, and development banking in Africa. He co-founded a financial firm in Kenya and helped raise over 500 million capital. I would like him to be on my team. So we are trying to have this very conversational. So you'll see we'll talk about leadership and ethics and the future and work and all of those things. And sprinkled in it, we'll have some personal anecdotes of how we use AI. To get started, I just wanted to say, I'm sure you all feel like we live through unprecedented time of change. It feels like, yesterday we were all catching up on machine learning. Today it's agentic AI. And AI is already changing how we work, how our organizations work, and our personal lives. Obviously, there's a lot of angst for a lot of people. They feel like, will my job be taken away? Or I think a lot of leaders also fear like, am I going to be outlet the door because I don't catch up to AI fast enough? And we do see early indications, at least in the US, that there's less entry-level job hiring. So, it's a time of upheaval. And so our central question today is how can you actively lead your organization through the AI area, and how to avoid AI leading your organization without you and leading you out the door. But we wanted to start with a fun human question before we get to the more serious questions about leadership. So I wanted to ask the panel how they use AI in their private life, a fun fact. I'll get started. So I live in New York under the Trump administration. Pretty depressing right now. So I started picking up knitting to get myself occupied and not get depressed every night. So it turns out I don't know how to read a knitting pattern. It is a foreign language. I've never heard of K1 SSK. Who's really good at deciphering that? ChatGPT. So I encourage you all to use it for knitting. Hardy, tell us how you use it.
I think it's always interesting to get outputs from from ChatGPT and put them into Claude. And you say, you kind of game Claude a bit and you say, look, this was my thinking. Could you critique it? And then the most violent one is Grok, because I said to Grok one day, look, this is the rubbish answer. if you keep going this way, I am going to go to ChatGPT. And it was like thinking 17 seconds, analyzing 27 seconds. And then, of course, I got a great answer.
Yeah. Joe, how do you use it?
I love the idea of getting the models to argue with each other. So I just, so I will often, although I'm not as creative as Hardy in getting across multiple models, I like to argue with GPT. So when you have a question you're working through and say, here's my position, and I want you to tell me why I'm wrong. It really actually enjoys that conversation a lot more than I do, as it tells me why I'm wrong, and it usually comes up with some really good answers that help shape a good idea.
Yeah. Bolor, any suggestions?
A lot of things, but actually comparing different platforms takes a lot of time, to be honest, which I've tried a lot of times. So we at AI Academy Asia, we do a lot of AI training. And one of our students, who is, I think, like 36 years old woman, she said, every time I have fight with my husband, I turn to GPT and ask, is it like, am I doing the right thing, or is it my husband's right? And ChatGPT is always say it's your right. So I think a lot of times GPT is replacing therapists in a way for those who need it.
Yeah. So tell us, like, how has AI affected what you do, and like, how do you think through like adopting AI for your organization? Joe, why don't you start? You lead a big organization.
Yeah, it's anybody that looks across what organizations are going to be impacted by AI. If you look at where it is in the kind of the quadrants, the target is on the back of professional services, knowledge work, lawyers, accountants. So it is absolutely impacting everything we do every day. And for us, the challenge is how do we get people to embrace it and understand it and use it in a responsible way, in a thoughtful way, a secure way. And that is all about the training and inspiration and how do you get people to come along.
So you don't like the shadow use of AI in your company?
So I'm sure we have plenty of shadow use of AI all over the company. But what we're really trying to do is bring controlled tools to everybody. So I always say, regardless of your role, your title, or your tenure, whatever it is that you do, AI is changing your work. So our responsibility as leaders is get you the right tools so that we don't have to worry about you doing shadow tools. We're giving you the very best tools every day. And that's what we've been doing. We now have our chat PwC platforms available to 320,000 of our 375,000 people. That includes multiple models. And that's really to get people engaged and using it and get them comfortable, because it's coming and it's here, and it's not going to wait for them to think about whether they want to apply.
Yeah. What does this platform do?
So Chat PwC is a controlled platform. So think of the models, but now the models in a secure environment where our data is protected and our clients' data is protected, and we have this capability for them to apply the models for their work every day. And it's one of several tools that we deploy, but at the end of the day, we're just asking people to rethink the way they work. And it's very hard to do that if you do it in the theoretical. You have to bring people to it. You've got to put their fingers on the keyboards. You have to immerse them in it. And for us, because of the businesses that we're in, we want to control that. We want to make sure we're being responsible with our clients' information and our firm's information, but we really need them in it. And that's what we've really been after.
Yeah. And Hardy, how do you use it in your company or organization?
I think maybe before talking about use, let me talk about the challenge in trying to get people to use it. And I think the real challenge that I find is going beyond the superficial.
Yeah.
I think that probably is, for any leader, that's probably the biggest challenge, that people will get exposed to the tools and they will do the simple things with the tools, get it to write your email, get it to critique a document. But you're not going to invest the kind of money that's needed to transform organizations by people just writing email with ChatGPT or, getting ChatGPT to help them research something. That's pretty obvious. So the real challenge is in getting the leadership, especially, because every leader has gotten to where they are because they have become somewhat experts. They've got deep customer relationships. They are a leader because everybody in the organization defers to them for knowledge, for judgment. And all of a sudden, they have to be comfortable that somebody else has a lot more information and insights than they have coming into the room. So the question becomes, so what's my role? you know. So that's on one side. But within Cassava, I mean, we're a global tech company out of Africa. We probably face more challenges than most people in accessibility to technology. But we've been able to surmount that by the way that we hire people. We've been in the telecom space for the last 30 plus years. So a lot of our staff, at one point, 70% of our staff were engineers, and only 30% were other professions. So they come naturally curious. That's both good and bad.
You don't want them to be too curious.
You don't want them to be too curious. But interestingly, the IT department is the place where AI goes to die.
Okay. How so?
So, hopefully, no CIOs in the room to be.
You'll find out how many CIOs are in the room right when you walk out the back, probably.
Look, I have a flight booked straight after this. I'm out of here. But I think seriously, getting the CIOs to embrace the changes that are needed and the apparent loss of power that comes with, the IT department was this place where everything was concentrated. All projects of the organization were concentrated. Getting teams across the organization to start to own the business question and the business answers is really the challenge for us.
Yeah. Bolor, how are you using AI in your organization?
I mean, we are an AI company, but building on what Hardy said, where AI dies in the tech team, many of our clients, especially clients that we work with who want to improve their efficiency, I found out that there is a big gap in between technical team and overall non-technical team, because technical team, they don't know the normal procedures or progress of different teams, right? But we want to use AI for everyone's productivity and everyone's efficiency, and we don't want it to be a burden that you have to adopt and adding more time that you have to do it. So rather than that, we need to make it more accessible. And this brings me to my next point, which that we work extensively on AI education and AI inclusion around the world. And one of the things that's often ignored in many of these conferences is that 2.6 billion people are completely offline, who makes up to 32% of the world's population. And this is a big number, and I don't know if it's a politically correct thing to say, but you see all this CEOs, CTOs, big tech companies having fancy dinner or Paris AI Summit and all this and that, but nobody mentions that. And if you see what they're doing, yes, they're promising certifications and everyone seems to set up an academy online, but it's only serving people who are already in the developed communities. So I think this is very important momentum for us as human, as people living in Samert, to have very good communications with each other, and also help making AI as an enabler to kind of narrow down this divide.
Yeah. So what are the challenges? So you were saying I'm glad you're all talking about AI, but we really need to talk about sort of access first. We don't even have broadband technology. Maybe Hardy and you can talk a little bit. What do you want to see before we even talk about AI adoption? What are we not seeing the world needs?
Look, I mean, AI sits at the top of a layer of infrastructure that needs to be there. From power to low latency connectivity to cost of devices. So in an African setting, if you think about one of the challenges that we are grappling with is how do we bring the cost of access to the internet down to less than 10 cents a gigabyte. It's about, in some countries, as high as $1. Now, if you think about the average earnings of people, to talk about AI certification to that person, it's almost like you're insulting them. I mean, you're talking to somebody who they only switch on their WhatsApp in order to get a message. If there's anything that comes with the image, they're going to try and switch it off because that's going to consume, a lot of the, a lot of the internet package that they've actually bought. So what we have done as Cassava over the last, 20 years is to systematically deal with each of those problems. So we've built almost 110,000 kilometers of fiber across Africa, literally from Cape Town to Cairo, and bringing fiber to the building, fiber to the home, and then ensuring that the last mile, because the real economics is that it is the last 1 mile that's very costly for access. And so bringing fixed wireless access for that last 1 mile, making sure that there is community internet that's available, working with device manufacturers to make sure that we can get devices into schools that are at a price point where most parents can afford. So anything that's going to cost more than $50 is just too expensive for adoption. You have to get the device down to sort of $20, $25. So the kind of challenges that are faced in the, let's say the next 1 billion users of AI are very different from the challenges that the first 1 billion users of AI have had to grapple with. I think whilst we sit and we talk about comparing models and outputs, there's a real challenge which I think COVID showed, especially on our continent, where the difference between a child having access to a classroom during COVID literally was, they could be staying 10 kilometers apart, and what they had access to was so different, and so the digital divide was that much wider. Our job at Cassava, and hence the name Cassava. Cassava, by the way, is the most widely eaten carbohydrate in Africa. So you find it in the villages, you can find it in the King's Palace. So we want technology to be as available, as accessible, as ubiquitous as the cassava plant is.
Yeah. Bolor, is that something you feel too? Like before we even move into AI, I have to solve the infrastructure problem first.
I mean, I completely agree with Hardy, because behind AI divide and digital divide, there's existing problems: poverty, hunger, infrastructure. 750 million people do not have electricity. But on the other hand, just if we want to imagine that those 2.6 billion people had access to internet and AI, it would unlock trillions and trillions of dollars to the global GDP.
Yeah.
So when you see from the investment side, you see these tech companies are in fierce competition to develop ever more powerful AI models. But just one point I really want to make, which I truly believe, is that the technology should not be measured by its advancement. Now it's time that we measure it by its inclusiveness.
And talk about how that is sort of a challenge in leadership, because I think what we often think of AI adoption in companies is, or organizations, is sort of let's make it more efficient, like you said, Hardy, right? That's where the IT department comes in. They want to make things more efficient. But really the question is if we're living through a paradigm shift, shouldn't we ask what's now, what's the new thing? How could we actually change things up? And maybe any of you have thoughts on that? Let's break down the structure and redo something totally new.
It's a great question, Hilke. I think, and it's a great challenge to all of us, right? We're laying out what may be the leadership challenge of our lifetime, which is how do we actually, if we all agree, and we're here in Vienna together, so I'm going to assume we all agree that there's a reason that we're all assembling in Vienna. There's a reason that we're going to listen to TED Talks. There's a reason we're in the discovery sessions. It's because we're watching and seeing from potentially one of the best informed perspectives in the world, this life-changing generational technology, multi-generational technology, and way too many people don't have access to it. And way too many people, as we sit and talk in leadership organizations with investment and capability and an educated workforce, certainly the PwC world, that these individuals, we're trying to bring them from a place of education and access to more education and access. We cannot forget the leadership obligation we have to help open up that access and that connectivity to more. And I do think that is a leadership challenge. That's a question of what obligation do we all feel? And are we communicating that obligation? Are we advocating for that obligation in our organizations, particularly those organizations with investment capacity?
Yeah. I mean, adding to that, okay, let's forget about the 2.6 billion people who are offline. But even in the most developed countries, there is a big divide too, whether between poor and wealthy, between rural and urban. So for leadership, when we say you have to see from a more inclusive side, it's not only talking about people in developing countries, but even in the most developed countries, there is a huge gap when you see how AI skills are being delivered or how it's being accessible to the poorest communities or even elder communities. So we are from early on of the design of ecosystem, AI ecosystem. We're designing it unknowingly, not intentionally, designing it to be very divisive. Even in the developed countries, it's same. So again, building on what Joe said, we really have to look from the perspective that how do we ensure that the security guard of PwC or a cleaning lady or someone who works in that kind of job would have access to AI skills and then maybe try to improve their lives. Yeah. Or improve their efficiency or whatever.
Yeah. So you're saying like break down the barriers, not only like get it in the hands of like already like your most educated workforce.
Exactly.
But like actually like break down these like silos and like make the upskilling and all of that accessible to anyone and break sort of out of the traditional like different sections of an organization. Like Hardy, what do you think in that kind of leadership? This new leadership that we are opening up, that we are envisioning?
I don't know whether I would call it new leadership. I think the requirements of leadership haven't really changed for 6,000 years. We are trying to change them because a new set of tools have come. And I think that's where the problem lies. Leaders have always been about trust. Leaders have always been about going for the greatest good. Leadership has always been about taking people into a brighter future. It hasn't been about exclusion. It hasn't been about beating your neighbor to death so that you win. I think what we're faced with is, in fact, this distancing from the ethos of leadership that humanity has known for a long time, because we believe that we are in the AI age, and therefore in the AI age there's a new way to lead, and so we start to confuse speed with direction. So that I think if we could go back to the basics of leadership, what does it actually mean to be a leader? It has to mean, for me as an African leader, Africa's population is young. Median age is 19. I can't possibly walk into my office every morning and think the profitability of our company is going to be divorced from youth employment. That's the most important sustainability question of leadership that I must be faced with every morning when I get into the office. But if I divorce that, I start operating, because I say, well, we're operating in the AI age. I've just been listening to Bloomberg, there's a new chip that has been, announced, and then PwC is doing this great thing, and there's this stuff happening in Mongolia. That now becomes, I think then that becomes a leadership fad rather than leadership. At least that's my view.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about sort of like the problem is like we're living through like a time of uncertainty. Leadership is like usually to project confidence and like lead the organization in the future, but we are building the plane while we're flying it. So how do you like, and I don't know if your folks going to be very excited if you say like, oh, I don't know any of the answers. I'll wait with you. That's probably not a good way. Like, so how do you deal with that? I
thought we agreed Hardy was getting all the hard questions. I thought we could establish that early on, but I will take my best shot at it. I do think there is and I love, Hardy, what you said, like the leadership, the fundamentals of leadership have not really changed. I do think that there is this moment right now where the uncertainty feels overwhelming to our people. And to people and organizations all over the place. And the dual challenge is, while that uncertainty takes over the way that they feel, if you do not create a degree of confidence in the pathway, then all the things we're talking about, adoption and engagement and learning, are even harder to do. At the same time, we owe our people the truth. And we recognize that tasks and parts of jobs that exist today and whole jobs that exist today are not going to exist in the form that they're in today. And so this leadership trust question is it only about efficiency and moving the jobs, or is it about bringing your people with you? And can you actually demonstrate that those aren't just words, it's a commitment to your organization? And that to me is the leadership test that's being applied to leaders. Certainly I feel it at PwC, and I know the rest of our leadership team does, that we're going to make changes in the business model. I don't know whether we will be 375,000 people 5 years from now or 10 years from now. I do know that we have an obligation to the 375,000 people we have today to help prepare them and equip them for not only the world today, but the future that we're leading into.
Yeah. So how are you doing this? Like, talk about like prospecting, but also like maybe a tool that you applied. And
yeah, so I'll give a couple of examples. I mean, and I love the example of, whether it's the leaders in the organization or whether it's the staff in the organization that are just starting their career. We feel very strongly that people need to have AI skills, and not just the superficial, right? They need to understand how to construct work. So last week we had a lot of our partners together for a global meeting. We did vibe coding sessions, right? So people that do vibe coding, I'm not sure you would have walked into the room and called this vibe coding, but just go with me here for a second. What we did was we immersed a whole bunch of people who are not used to using tools like this, and we asked them to use the tools to create applications that would fulfill a client need. And we did it in an hour. We had them all sitting in the room, working with the tools. We had developed some assistant capabilities to give them a framework around it. And what was so cool about it is you had people that have been in the careers for 25, 30 years. All of a sudden, for the very first time, they'd put hands to keyboard and created an application, and the application was a dashboard or whatever it was. The application didn't matter as much. What mattered as much was the light bulbs that went off over people's heads, that things are changing. And that wasn't about making all of these leaders in the organization coders. That was about making these leaders in the organization understand the challenge of the teams and the staff that they were living with every day, and to get them engaged in the problem and get them engaged in the opportunity, so that their people looking up at them have confidence that they actually understand the problem. And I think that is a very, very significant challenge of leadership right now, is that the teams, and we talked about the tenure and age, there is a tenure and age issue at play here. Our entry-level folks have been using these tools for 5 years, or 3 years, 4 years, but they are not coming in dry. They're coming in with skills. If they're looking up at leaders who don't understand what they're talking about, that's a problem.
Yeah, yeah. So you're trying to actually bring the leaders, into the here and now.
And the good news is, I think the leaders are willing, but in some ways, the leaders, those people that have been in their careers for a longer period of time, in some ways, they are more secure, obviously, in where they are in their career, but they feel more at risk in the application of these technologies.
Yeah, yeah. And so how do you think about how do I want to educate people about AI in the Global South? What does your leadership look like?
Mm-hmm. Adding on what Joe said, I think working with different companies, one of the very basic but very important thing is to be on the same page on AI. So if you ask from your data analyst to your CIO to different teams, they all have different take on AI personally, but also professionally when it comes to your organization. So I see a lot of companies are announcing AI strategy, AI vision, but when you really dive into it, a lot of people, there's a lot of misunderstanding. So one of the best approach that we work on is to have different sessions like you had, but bring the CEO to the most junior level people and put them on the same page. And I think for organization-wise, I think that's very important as an organization to understand this is how we're going to use AI. And this is our vision. This part we don't know. So it's very important to be transparent. And on the global south, especially Southeast Asia and Central Asia, connectivity-wise, it's going very well. It's going very well. In Mongolia, you will be shocked to know that we don't pay in cash anymore. It's almost 99% online payment. One of the projects I did when I was in government was called e-Mongolia, and we've digitalized over 1,200 government services. And it was adopted very well because we have nomadic communities living in the countryside. So imagine you're someone living in the city. For you to go to the government facility and get your service, it would take 20 minutes. But for someone who's literally living in the middle of nowhere, for them to go to the government facility, it will take hours to drive, a lot of money. So within such short amount of time, we delivered 1,200 services, and today 92% of Mongolia's population actively using that. And by this, what I'm trying to say is that it has to meet people's needs. Mm-hmm. So AI has to be very practical. And now, because of all these uncertainties, there are a lot of fake news, a lot of superstitious things, a lot of crazy things online, right? And the best way is to be very practical and give them efficiency tools that they can use easily and adopt easily. And I think that's the best way to start.
Yeah. So you have to listen to their needs and actually adapt to that as a leader. Hardy, how does that work in your organization?
Look, I think AI is going to...
I think you have to probably hold it a little closer.
So I must have said something controversial because they gave me this. So they killed the other one.
Very good.
I think one of the things that AI is bringing back to leadership is something that had started to disappear, something called humility. I think all of us as leaders have been trained to be confident, and we forgot that there is this tension between confidence and humility. And for the first time, to your point, Joe, when you and to your point, when you put me in the same room on a lovable platform with an entry level analyst, and we're trying to create something on that platform. Of course, he or she is going to create something quicker, better than I could ever do, and therein lies the humility, and with humility comes the ability to learn. In the context of Africa, that's very important because we're a high context, very hierarchical society, which may be the same as Southeast Asia, where there's it's very much top down, leadership. It's not egalitarian. So in that, the leader's behavior. If the leader starts to learn, then people will take learning as something that they need to take on. I think one of the things that we are trying to do is how do we bring digital transformation to government? Because one of the things that has been a limiting factor in our growth over the last 30 years has been, regulators that are so far behind where technology is. And when you ask a regulator something they don't understand, they've got a very good answer. And that good answer is just no.
Rubbish. Oh, okay.
Okay. Don't do that. Okay. And so we're trying to get to pay this subsidy to regulators and governments. I think in the global south, perhaps the biggest challenge that we have is how do we get governments to embrace technology as a key transformation agent Because if you look at what needs to happen, the difference between where population growth is and where GDP growth is, to bridge that divide for a young population requires such a transformation in the thinking of policy leaders that it's really for companies like us in the tech world that understand what's happening, that should be paying the cost of educating policymakers, educating leaders to say, let's embrace AI. Let's bring AI to, you've got classrooms in Africa of 120 kids
Wow.
with one barely trained teacher.
Wow.
Now, imagine what AI could do. You've got, a clinic that doesn't have a pharmacist, a radiologist, and has a chief nurse as the one that's running, the clinic. Imagine what AI does in that environment. You've got a whole district, maybe of, 500,000 people, that maybe has got 5-6 trained agronomists. This is an area the size of Belgium, in some cases. And you've got 5-6 trained agronomists. If we could amplify what they can do, because, Africa now has 1 billion mobile phones, 350 million smartphones. This is more smartphones than the US. So we could, we absolutely have an opportunity to transform using this.
Yeah. You brought up humility. How do you take that into a large corporation like PwC and sort of think through, like, I have an obligation to folks who are already in their organization. I want them to trust me, but at the same time, I want people to be adaptive and learning. I want to learn. Like, how do you make sense of all of that?
I do think it comes down to the culture you create in the organization, and I think we're coming back to the principles that have endured in leadership for a long time. We're talking about humility, we're talking about learning and constant learning, we're talking about trust, and I think that's exactly the right conversation. By the way, it is exactly the right conversation. So if an organization is looking up at leadership who tells you that they know exactly what the organization is going to look like in 3 to 5 years, and they know exactly what the AI is going to do, there's not a soul in that organization that believes them. So it's not credible, it's not trustworthy, and you can start to deteriorate that trust very rapidly. If you're going to ask people to take a leap, which is what we're going to do, we're going to ask people, and we're already doing it, we're asking people to rethink the way they work. We're asking people to take time that they spend doing tasks today for which we communicate their value to them. Oh, this is great. Thanks for doing that thing that took you 4 hours. And then we tell them, but we want you to do it in 8 minutes. The human mind immediately goes to, well, what am I going to do with the other 3 hours and 52 minutes? And are you going to keep me around? And that requires this transparent discussion with your people about what you're really asking them to do. And I talk a lot about with clients. Clients are asking all the business side of this conversation very quickly goes to ROI. What's the ROI on all these investments we're making? We're making all these investments. We've got all these tools. Today, I would tell you that I think much of the ROI is accruing to the individuals in organizations and not to the enterprises. I think that's okay. But I think the next thing that we need to figure out is how to open that up so that the individuals who are accruing that benefit trust the organization enough to share that story. Because a lot of them are.
So how do you get them to, like, people use it individually and they make, they change their workflow and are more efficient, like, to get it up the leadership chain to actually see that and believe in that?
There's a couple things. I think one is in both Bolor and Hardy hit it. One is you have to celebrate what works, and you have to celebrate when people make those contributions. And it isn't just celebrated in the C-suite. You have to celebrate the individuals that are doing it across your organization. So we have, for example, a champions program. So all of our leaders have a reverse mentor, somebody that's less tenured in the organization that's helping them understand and train the tools. That's a huge opportunity for those individuals, right? So they get time and face time with leadership. They get to understand the strategy of the organization. They get a view that they would not likely get at that stage of their career. And then you celebrate that. You make sure people know that those are the investments you're making. You recognize those individuals that are leading and taking that faith leap with you to make the changes. And I think you have to be credible and trustworthy in your communications as to what the business is doing and what the organization is doing. It's not my line, it's a great line. Nobody ever did anything because of a number. They have to know the story. So you can't tell people that this is great because we're getting more efficient. I've never met an employee who gives a nickel's care about whether or not the enterprise is efficient. They just don't. They care about their job and their growth and their mortgage and their family and the things that are there. If you can't connect that, then you're going to lose them. We have a wonderful cultural benefit at PwC. A lot of our people are early career. A lot of our people are looking to grow their careers. So it is a wonderful laboratory for this, and not every organization benefits from that.
Yeah. And can you talk about like sort of, we always thought like leadership is like sort of top down, you like evaluate new technologies and you roll it out in the enterprise. And because, it costs so much money to do this. But now, I mean, does it really cost that much money anymore? And can you do it differently?
Yeah, I think you absolutely, not only can you do it differently, I think you have to do it differently. And I won't offend all the CIOs in the room the same way that Hardy did a few years ago, except to say, and I say this with our CIOs all the time, like the old model doesn't work anymore. The rapid development has to be part of the culture. And the recognition that sometimes you're going to develop something that doesn't work and you're going to throw it overboard and move on is okay. That runs so counter to the way most of us have thought through the last 25, 30 years. We're making investments. We're going to keep working at it. It's large scale. It's going to take 5 years. And then once we're done, we're going to train everybody in how to do it. That's nonsense. It does not work in the environment today. Many, many more of the opportunities are created with small agents and small assistants, and making the what I'll characterize respectfully as the small work we all do every day, making that small work a lot better.
Wow. Do you have any like examples of that? Like how, like, you let people in all these, I mean, also like PwC has all these different like compliance, different places around the world. There's also another challenge, like how does it bubble up and how do you give people time to do these super important, like just experimenting?
It's all running smooth as glass and perfect. It's required to say that. So it's all seamless and integrated and wonderful. I'll give a very simple example. So most of us who've worked in consulting type firms or have been purchasers of consulting firms, we have a wonderful process called RFPs. Governments have these too. Just a show of hands who has decided in their career that they really want to spend a lot of time on RFPs. So I've been doing it for decades, and I've never really enjoyed the process I love the process of working with the client in the room ideating. I hate the process of responding to an RFP. And by the way, I think most of our clients would probably admit they hate the process of reading the responses we send to the RFP. So we have what we call our BD.ai. It's a set of assets we've deployed that allows our people to take a lot of that time off of their plate, focus instead on developing the relationships, making sure the solution's right, think about the pricing and value exchange for clients. And that one is a great example because you don't have to convince people to use that. The moment they know it's available, they're all in and they're going after it.
Yeah. And I want to look like a little bit into ethics and into the future, and then we want to open it up to all of your questions. But I wanted to see, like, what have you learned on, like, what are the future of jobs going to look like? What are the future, like, what do you look at new employees? Like, has that changed what you're looking for in this new age, Hardy?
What? It's what are we looking for? It's I think that I keep going back to this thing of confusing tools with sort of the baseline requirements. I think every organization that I know is still looking for the same type of employee that organizations have always looked for. Hardworking, happy to be paid as little as possible.
Have you found them yet?
Yeah.
Where are they at?
I think the only problem is that that's what the organization wants. That's not what the employees want. So that ends the tension. But look, I think it's the lifelong learning. It's the comfort with experimentation. And I think the biggest challenge that we as leaders are faced with is that we are now in an age of experimentation. And experimentation goes counter to the fact that, I have 30 years of experience.
Yeah, it makes us uncomfortable.
So now you're trying to make me obsolete by all these experiments that, that you're running. So I think, people that are comfortable with new things, people that are comfortable with failure, people that are comfortable with a startup culture, which is, counterintuitive, because we all get into business to build big companies. That's kind of, it's almost like, sitting at the chessboard and not wanting to win. You sit at the chessboard because you want to win. So you start a company, you want to build it, you want it to become successful, more profitable, hire a lot more people. And yet you still want to have people within the organization that are willing to experiment, that are willing to look at new ways of doing things, people that have got a good dose of humility. Whether or not we can find those people, I think that initially people are very happy to learn until they get into a position of authority.
Aha. So it's the leaders that are having the hardest time.
So maybe, when we open it up, I'm very curious to hear from people, what happens when, the people that have been eager to learn and, because I think learning has been used as a tool, and maybe that's a fault of leadership, as a tool to differentiate people. The fast learners are the ones that then rise up, the organization. So it'll be interesting to hear from others.
Bolor, what have you found out? Like, how are jobs changing? Like, how does leadership need to adapt to that?
A lot of things that hard said I could relate when I was working in the government. When we were introducing the digitalization, there was a big protest from within the government, because a lot of people think like you're they thought I was making them unemployable or replacing them with technology. And this fear has always existed. And for future of jobs, the World Bank study shows that by 2030, 50% of the jobs will require AI skills. And I think that's quite a relatable number. But again, most of the companies and organizations are willing to train. And one of the things I want to talk about this, one of our students who's 65 years old, and he, trust me when I say this, he is the most successful AI learner I've seen so far. And he built his own AI model and he created this family tree for himself. And he comes from very rural Mongolia, and he thought in his village it's too small population and people are not knowing their, second cousins, third cousins, so they need to know who's your family member and stuff like that. So he created this platform as his side hustle, as his hobby, and he registered 9,000 families.
Wow.
And now it's applicable nationwide. You can just use it for free, and he just did it. And he did it after 2 months of training. So this is and trust me, also on the other side, we have a bunch of young people that we've been trying so hard to train them, and they don't seem to learn. So again, it's the perspective, it's the attitude, it's the level of adaptability, right? And I think the best way to go for it is to have a very smooth transition in the times of uncertainty.
Yeah. While you're all getting all your questions ready, I have one more. We talk a lot about AI skills. You need to have.
Is he looking for a job?
Well, he's hiring.
Well, I can send him to Africa.
He sounds very expensive, though.
We talk a lot about AI skills. What does that actually mean when we say that? You need to have AI skills. Well, what does that mean? You need to prompt ChatGPT. What are you saying?
So two things. One, we do a study on jobs every year. We call it the AI Jobs Barometer. It'll be updated here shortly. When we looked at AI skills broadly, which we defined as the ability to apply, we defined it very, very broadly, because I think that's changing every minute, what we really mean by AI skills. But when we looked at AI skills and we asked the question whether or not individuals had them, regardless of what industry and operating role they were in, shocker, you'll all be surprised to learn that what the data tells us is that those individuals are valued more highly and they're paid more highly. And sometimes the premiums were up to 56%. It was a massive premium for AI skills. I think the reality is lots of organizations don't know what they mean when they say AI skills. And when you go through the stack of like, do I need engineering capability? Do I need people that understand how to train models? Do I need people that understand how to use tools? Do I need people to build agents? I think it's all of those things. And you can be in a lot of different places on the continuum. But I do think that, and I loved, Bolor, your comment about AI needs to be practical. I do think when we're starting to talk about skills and jobs, we have to get really practical about what that intersection looks like in our organizations. And that requires planning and thought and specific documentation, if you will, like just work through the details of it to make sure that you're understanding what it is you're really expecting people to apply from a skills perspective.
Yeah. And Hardy, how do you make sure you have like the trust, the ethics, like the values of the organization still there, right? Like you ask people to like experiment, but you also want to make sure they don't use like client data or like personal information and throw that in there because they want to make workflow more efficient. Can you talk about that? How do you keep like those, ethical things that we have strived for decades to sort of implement and keep that still there?
Yeah, I think if you go for the enforcement approach and my chief AI officer is here, and remember when ChatGPT first came out, first email out.
Don't touch it.
I own up. I send out this email. You are not allowed to use this thing. This is going to expose our data. This is. And then one day I thought to myself, how many people really ignored this email? I think 99%. 99% just said, well, how is he ever going to know?
But
And the truth is, how are you ever going to know? I think the cost of monitoring what people are doing is very high. People don't like to be monitored. I think it's going back to the values of the organization. It's really getting people to understand the why, that this is about the way that we do things. This is about the way that we win. This is about the way that we respect our clients. I mean, one of our overarching principles at Cassava is stewardship. We are the stewards of the trust of our customers, and we should never abuse that. So we use that as the basis for getting people to behave responsibly with AI. But I think if you can print as many posters as you like, put them in the escalator, on the walls, AI ethics, I think you have to, we are trying to link it back to our values, to the values of the organization, and getting people to understand this is why this is right and this is why this is wrong.
Any questions? Yes, go ahead. I think somebody is running to get you a microphone.
Thank you very much. This was quite exciting. I have been working also in technology and applying technology a lot of times in telcos. The one thing where I think this discussion feels new, but it's actually an old discussion with just like two added elements, is 90% of digital transformations fail. All the reasons why digital transformations fail are the same reasons why AI transformations fail. There's just two additional things. There is this there's more fear. Three things: higher speed of change, and some ethical and legal guys have more opinions. What is your point of view of that? It's just to go back to really the basics, because I think those companies who fail in digital transformation should first understand why they failed there before starting to reinvent the wheel for AI.
Yeah.
So talk about failure.
Sure. I've got a lot of stories on failure. How much time do we have? I think I love your 3 points about why these things are failing. And I say to clients all the time, if you're looking at AI and you're thinking about this and saying, I've got to apply AI, and that is somehow different than what you did 5 years ago when you said, what is this technology going to deliver for my organization? Then you're missing a really, really important fundamental question. If you're in a for-profit organization, you're applying technology to get you a better outcome for the business. If you don't know what the outcome you're after, you're going to fail. So that's the first. The second, I love your point on speed. And Hardy, you hit this point too. This idea that speed is an objective in its own right is dangerous. And the technology is moving at an incredible pace. We all recognize that. We all feel it. But sometimes we have this tendency to want to match the pace of the technology innovation. And what we need to be doing is pacing the change for how our organization can actually digest it. And by the way, that may include our clients, that may include our customers, because they're not ready for the change at the pace that we need to drive. So I think pacing is really important. Having said that, there's a great Harvard article. Sorry, it's not a Princeton article. But there's a Harvard article that Andy Jassy did an interview, and he talks about speed as a management decision. And it's a really, really good read. It's a really good read. I think you have to be deliberate about what speed you're taking, and make sure you don't live in a place where you're just letting things percolate because it feels more comfortable. So just a couple reactions to 2 of your 3.
Yeah. Any other questions? There's a hand in the back.
Yeah, thank you. You were talking about speed now, and you were also talking about trust. But the reality is, as a CEO, we are more or less used to make decisions based on uncertainties. Yeah. But now it feels different. So today it feels totally different. So how do you make decisions? Because all the experiments that you do fail. You have no idea which direction you're going, and everybody can hit you from any side. So it's like you are in a chaotic situation and you have to make decisions and feel like comfortable, but actually you're not. So how do you solve this problem?
How do you do that, Hardy? But look at you as a CEO.
Wow. I've been offered up as an offering here. So, I mean, here's what comes to my mind. If you go back to the time when shipping containers showed up, we forget that, somebody had to think about coming up with a shipping container. Up to that time, everything that was being shipped as break bulk and in pallets, and you couldn't coat it properly. The shipping container kind of standardized things and changed the way that leaders had to make decisions in that industry, in the supply chain management, because all of a sudden the guy who is operating a truck or a railroad or a ship knows exactly what a shipping container looks like. It has got these dimensions, and therefore I can... And I think today, as a CEO, I have to really spend the time differentiating between the tools and the solutions. And spending the time to really think, what is the solution that I need to come up with? The shipping container was, it's a tool that was introduced in the supply chain. Singapore came up with the solution, of having, the port with the dip, the dip berths, and it's not about the location of Singapore. So I think it's the premium on judgment that we all now have to focus on as leaders. And the judgment is about, can I really differentiate between the tools which are proliferating everywhere and the solutions that really impact the way that my customers are going to succeed? So hopefully I didn't, confuse you further with that answer.
But Bola, how do you judge new technology that flies? I'm sure you get 1,000 pitches a day, like, of AI tools. Like, this is cool stuff. Like, how do you judge that?
I would say 2 points. The first one is we have to see what problem that AI is trying to solve and really prioritize in that, because there's 1,000 models, new things launching every day on AI, and it's very hard to prioritize. But I think it's very important that we see it from the problem side, and what is the urgency, and what is what is this problem that you would prioritize and invest and put your effort into it. And I think, and even if it fails, it's worth the shot, because you wanted to solve the biggest problem or the right problem or the most urgent problem. So I think in the midst of all this AI chaos, we need to sit down and take a breath and really see what kind of problem it's trying to solve, and even within the organization, to the national level, to the global level. Second, to be honest, now a lot of companies are rushing into AI when they don't have the readiness, data readiness, team readiness, capacity, and you know, from outside perspective, I can see some of my clients already failing even before they start because the data is not qualified. They don't have the good quality data. And you'll have a CEO reading all this Financial Times and fancy news, and he wants to be talking about AI on the stage. And yeah, so you really, we have to be very realistic in that, and you need to evaluate your readiness.
Hit us with your questions. Yes, there's one, I think, right next to you. Perfect.
Thank you. I was interested to hear the comment about potential shift in business model, Joe, because I think consultancy is going to be a really interesting area as AI progresses. So could you just give me some thoughts on what kinds of business models it might shift to? Because obviously a fee for time is an obvious one, but that is fundamentally going to be under threat, I suspect, in certain areas. Have you got any views on that?
I absolutely do. So I say this sometimes publicly, and then I get notes from my partners that I have to stop saying this out loud. But I think rates for hours is the worst economic business model exchange that we've created in history. It is just, if you ask me to rank the 24 hours I spent the last 24 and tell you which ones are worth whatever my bill rate is and which ones are not, I'd have a hard time doing that. It is just very, very different. It has to be outcomes based. And that is already happening, by the way. In some of our businesses around the world, 60 to 70% of our revenue today is outcomes oriented with our clients. So here's what we're promising to deliver. Here's the value of that client. You're going to get the bulk of the value. We're going to share a little of the value, and we move from there. So I think that will be the large construct. The other really interesting question is about jobs. I mean, I've been with the firm for 32 years. I love the place. I've lost all objectivity about it. But one of the things I love most about it, it is an engine for people's growth. It is the reason I've been there. You take people that are at the very beginning of their career and you give them a practical education and delivery across businesses, and you grow them through their career. We are under challenge as to what that's going to look like, because a lot of those entry-level staff were coming in. They're coming in to do work that is now going to be delivered by AI. What I think will happen, all the predictions worth exactly what predictions are usually worth on a stage of a panel. But what I think will happen is the triangle will move up, right? So it will look a little bit different, but we'll ask something very different of those entry-level employees. We'll still have plenty of entry-level employees. We're just going to ask something very, very different of them. So just a couple reactions on the consulting front.
So you still will have entry-level employees? Because I always wonder, if we get rid of them, what is going to be, who's going to be, the middle leadership,
So just to show of hands, how many people in the room who have employment today were not entry-level employees at one point in their life? I'm just curious. So I think we've got to confront that reality, right? We have to develop talent for the future. I do think it's going to look very different. I think it's going to look very different. By the way, if those of you that have children, nephews, nieces, neighbors that are in that demographic coming in, they are so much smarter than we were first, and their expectations of the trade between their career and the business are so much more rational than ours were. So this is another terrible story. So we had this rule called the Partner 15. And the Partner 15 was a rule that the staff all talked about, which was you did not leave the client site until 15 minutes after the partner went to the parking lot, whether you had any work to do or not. That is the stupidest thing ever. This is 30 years ago, to be fair, but it's the stupidest thing ever. But it was because we knew the partner was going to stop and talk to the client 12 times, and nobody wanted to be leaving before the partner. I can tell you our staff today say goodnight to me on their way out the door if they're ready to call their day. And that's a good thing. That is a good cultural change in our business. So I absolutely think we not only need entry-level talent, we need to now start to invest in entry-level talent. That investment will pay off in organizations over time.
Any other? Oh, one in the front.
Thank you. Thanks for the interesting discussion. Just a quick question is talk about changing business model, talk about change early employee. what about school education? How we can prepare kids in education with school, not just to become dummy, just using AI, but being interesting, critic, and challenging a new worker tomorrow. Thank you.
This is yours.
That's a really hard question.
How did you solve that problem? The AI Academy.
Super hard questions go to Bolor.
Well, I'd love to be talking about answering that in past tense. I would love that. But, from this year, actually, there are quite a few countries who embedded AI officially to their education curriculum. And one of the countries is China from the elementary school. And then there's Estonia and Singapore and a few other countries starting from middle school and high school. But when we talk about AI in education, again, it's the chicken and egg problem. We don't have AI trainers. And that's where we have to start. And actually, this summer, we've trained Mongolia's first 500 trainers, and in 2026, we're going to train 1,000 AI trainers across Africa and Central Asia and Southeast Asia. But I see these teachers, after they're trained, they build their own models. They created their AI assistant. They created their chatbot with parents, chatbot with students, and we've actually examined a few of those, and it's very, very practical. It doesn't look very good interior, UI, UX wise, but it's very practical, and it's really helping them save time, and especially countries where there are so many kids and maybe one teacher. I think, to be frank, where we have to start in education is we have to start by training the trainers before anyone else, and that's very important. And adding to that, I just want to bring out the story, and I've been running Girls Code program for 5 years. I come from nomadic family. I own 300 ships. If you are ever in Mongolia, I will make you barbecue for that. With that, and I'm very proud to come from where I came from, but I've always wanted to give access to girls who are living in the nomadic community, and we started this boot camp. We've trained 150 girls so far, and at this very moment, we're training 200 more. But these girls who has never been to the city, they come for this boot camp. When they go back, they start their own AI club. They teach AI to other students. And one of our girls is studying at NYU as a data scientist with 100% scholarship. I have a lot of girls who are working part-time, paying off their family debts. I have some girl who spoke at AI for Good Summit in Geneva in front of thousands of people after Geoffrey Hinton spoke. So this is what happens when you give access to those who do not have access. And this is why, and every time I talk about this, you'll see this is a nice story and you go out and forget. But why does it matter to you? It matters because the world is small, and somehow you connect, and somehow you find mutual friends, and unexpectedly it works like that. And when we give access to these kids in Africa, Asia, anywhere in the world, it really embraces, and the multiplier effect is just crazy. I've never really imagined, and I never imagined I would be doing this for so long and really getting into that. But just looking at the girls and how they're doing after the program is just life-changing. So yeah, I think, we have to invest into our kids, and we have to train the teachers first.
So we have to train the kids for AI skills, but also maybe thinking through maybe that not AI will solve everything. Every pitch is a good pitch of AI tools. How do you retain that critical thinking, right? When you can so easily outsource your homework to a chatbot.
Well, it's interesting, Hardy. You were talking about the first memo that you sent on ChatGPT. If you go to the U.S. university system as an example, that was the first memo every president of every university sent, and it was what every professor started with: is you cannot use these tools in my classroom. And the good news, because I'm an optimist, the good news is that conversation has changed pretty rapidly. It's how do you use them responsibly? How do I know when you're using them? How do I make sure that you're learning in that process? And I think that's good news, not only because the conversation is a much more intelligent conversation, frankly, because they were using them anyway. I think the other part of that conversation is, as soon as they get to us or to you as employers, we need them to use it. We need them to use it in responsible, thoughtful ways. So I think particularly in the university systems and the higher education systems, you're seeing the shift. But that is a slow boat to change. If that was a container ship, it would be really, 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 really large and slow. So that's going to take a while. But I do think you're seeing a recognition in the university systems.
I think there's a question way in the back.
Yeah, last row. Hey, thank you.
Hi.
This question is going to simplify a very complex question. As AI advances, we are looking at a cultural change within the companies. My question is, which the better approach would be, one that recognizes a paradigms change, one that goes from the bottom up of whole-scale change within the organization, or is it more advisable to go use case by use case and let the change creep into the culture as it happens?
So,
Anyone want to take that?
I think all of us need to pitch in here. I think there is I'm not sure that there's a one-size-fits-all. I think AI, we have to think about AI in culture, in societal culture. I think that the way that a German management system works, and the way that an American management system works, and the way that we manage companies in Africa, or companies are managed in Southeast Asia, there's a cultural overlay that exists within that society that we have to recognize, and that already is generally within the organization. So, to use the example of, I think some of you have read about, the time when Korea Airlines was changing, when they had, a lot of accidents, because the first officer would be deferring to the captain, who is a lot more experienced, but the first officer would see that the plane is going to crash, but because they thought the captain is very experienced, they kept quiet. They were not allowed to speak, and unfortunately, Korea Airlines went through this period, but it was very cultural. It was because, at that time in Korea, people, you deferred to your elders and you didn't question authority. So I think, yes, AI is going to change the way that we need to run companies as leaders, but it cannot exist in a vacuum. It has to take into account the cultural nuances. And in my specific case, in Africa, where, as I said before, very hierarchical society, people defer to their elders. If I can change the way that my leadership team is behaving, if they are embracing learning, if they're embracing experimentation, it becomes much easier for the rest of the organization to pick up that culture.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I agree with that completely, and I think there is a element of the culture that exists in the organization already, and how to embrace it to make the change work in the organization. So you have to be reflective of what's going to work and what's not going to work. But I do think we have a tendency to think about this as an either or. It's a top down or it's a bottoms up, and it's got to be a both. And I'll pick on the CIOs again, because that's always fun. The organizational structures around IT are often about control, for lots of really good reasons, by the way.
Yeah.
Control and process and et cetera. And what happens is, when you centralize that control too tightly, you risk a disconnect to the people that are actually on the front line of the business, talking to your customers and your clients. You risk a disconnect to the people that are all at different levels in the organization. And no amount of inspirational leadership is going to break that frozen middle problem. It just won't. It does not matter what speeches the leadership team can give. You need that innovation at the edge, percolating through the organization, because that's really what inspires people. They get excited not because Atkinson and his CAIO job said it, but they get excited because somebody they've known for a couple of years is now being celebrated for a great innovation that they've done. So I think you need them both.
Great last words. Like, I hope we all inspire you with the new playbook on leadership. You can go out and lead. As you know, we live through unprecedented times, but I also wanted to say we'll be around. Like, we're closing this panel, but we are around here if you have any more questions. But like, go out and lead. And thank you so much for being here.